Do you think working yourself to the bone to raise your children will earn you dignity and respect in your old age? Don't be naive. Your lifelong sacrifices are actually just a burden in their eyes. Stop waiting for your children to understand. Today I am going to use neuroscience to tear away the facade of family harmony. I will tell you why the more you compromise, the more desolate your later years will be. You sit on the old sofa in the living room every day, staring blankly at the television screen. Actually, your mind is not on those variety shows or news broadcasts at all. You are still waiting. You are waiting for an apology that will never come. You are waiting for your children to suddenly have an epiphany one day. You are waiting for them to understand the bitter hardships you have endured and the grievances you have swallowed for most of your life. You have rehearsed that touching scene of complete reconciliation countless times in your head. You imagine that they have finally matured through their struggles in society. You imagine them coming home one day, carrying bags of gifts and sitting in front of you with tears in their eyes. You imagine them holding your hands tightly and saying, "Mom and Dad, you have worked too hard your whole lives." You imagine them finally lowering their heads to admit how ignorant and cruel their past defiance and neglect truly were. You have even made this illusory scene the sole ultimate spiritual pillar of your old age. Traditional beliefs always tell us that you reap what you sow. You think family affection is also a precisely calculated investment return system. The truth is that you have treated sacrifice as a universal currency that can be exchanged for understanding. But this outdated neural circuit has only managed to move yourself in the end. You always uncontrollably recall those details of your past life. You remember how many years ago you gave up that long-awaited trip to save money for their expensive tutoring classes. You remember how at the dinner table you always habitually picked up the piece of fatty meat or the leftover vegetable scraps that no one else wanted to eat. You remember the heavy sighs you swallowed in countless dead of nights to make ends meet for this family or to scrape together their down payment. You compressed your personal desires to an absolute minimum, even approaching zero. You completely folded your own life into the trajectory of their lives. You thought this unreserved folding would definitely be remembered. You thought your forbearance would be engraved on the family monument and passed down through generations. You thought time would eventually give you an absolutely fair resolution, so you have lived year after year carrying this tragic expectation. You watched them slowly grow up. You watched them leave their hometown to work hard in big cities. You watched them start their own small families and develop values completely different from yours. Then you suddenly realized something was wrong. They did not feel eternally grateful to you as you had imagined. They even feel that your sacrifices were redundant or self-imposed. They openly show impatient expressions when you ramble on about how difficult things were back in the day. They lightly dismiss all your efforts with a single sentence, saying times are different now and nobody does things the way you did. In that moment, your heart is filled with anger, unwillingness, and a deep sense of injustice. You feel betrayed by the closest people in the world. You feel that the ethical principles and basic truths in this world have been completely turned upside down. So you begin telling yourself a tragic story about moral decay and familial coldness. You tell yourself it is just your bad luck to have given birth to ignorant and inconsiderate children. You tell yourself that this society has changed too fast and lost traditional filial piety and human warmth. You use these seemingly grand social narratives to explain your own deep personal pain right now. You feel that as long as you continue to occupy the moral high ground of a victim, you are doing the right thing. You treat this sense of grievance like a heavy metal, pinning it firmly to your chest to show the whole world. The more you ruminate on your past contributions, the deeper your current dissatisfaction becomes. The more dissatisfied you feel, the more you like to repeat your sacrifices to old friends, former colleagues, or relatives. You try to gain sympathy, validation, and even a slight sense of psychological balance from others. When others agree with you and say young people today really do not understand, you feel a brief moment of comfort. But this comfort vanishes instantly the next morning when you wake up alone facing an empty room. You are still that old person sitting in an empty living room sulking. Your pain has not decreased one bit, and your life has not undergone any substantial change. What if I told you that the story about morality and family affection is completely wrong? What if I told you that the reason you cannot free yourself from this pain is not at all because your children are not good enough, but because of your brain's physical structure? Let us introduce the most ruthless fact in modern neuroscience and psychology. William James is the father of American psychology. He is also the first thinker to study with scientific precision why human beings commit actions that go against their own interests. Combined with modern neuroplasticity theories, we will uncover a terrifying truth. In 1949, psychologist Donald Hebb proposed a famous neurological law. He pointed out that neurons that fire together wire together. This is the famous Hebb's law, which explains how habits alter the brain on a physical level. If James and Hebb could see your current cycle of pain, they would point out the truth that most people still refuse to face today. That is, your sense of grievance is not a noble moral outcome at all. It is a deep-seated physiological imprint. It is a profound recalibration of your nervous system. Over the past few decades, your brain has completely adapted to that pattern of giving and enduring. Every time you suppressed your own needs to satisfy others. Every time you swallowed a grievance in exchange for superficial peace in the family. Every time you cried silently in the dead of night and then continued to force a smile the next day to work for the family. Your nervous system was undergoing extremely high-intensity learning. It was learning a survival strategy called the victim mode. Your brain is not a neutral wilderness that allows you to wake up every morning and freely choose whether today will be happy or sad. Your brain is a complex terrain that has already been deeply carved by heavy machinery. It is covered with deep grooves and established pathways that have been walked incredibly smooth by decades of time. You can imagine your brain as a massive high-speed railway network. These pathways are the high-speed rail tracks you forcibly laid down through decades of repetitive behavior. When you repressed yourself for your family the first time, this track merely laid down a weak foundation. But when you did it for the 10,000th time, this track had become an indestructible reinforced concrete structure. When your children do something that does not meet your expectations, your brain receives an external stimulus signal. This signal does not pause to think and choose a rational and objective direction for reaction. It simply rushes automatically toward the path of least resistance, like a high-speed train. And that path of least resistance is the channel you have walked the most and are most familiar with in your entire life. That is to immediately feel wronged. That is to immediately start playing your memoir of sacrifices. That is to immediately enter a tragic and familiar state of victimhood. The generation of this emotion does not even require the consent of your rational brain at all. It is an entirely automatically triggered physiological response. The famous trauma research expert Bessel van der Kolk explicitly points out in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. Long-term emotional suppression and grievance do not merely stay at the level of thought, they are directly stored in your body. This is why you clearly know being angry is bad for your health. And you clearly know saying complaining words will only make the parent-child relationship worse, but you simply cannot control yourself. This is why you often inexplicably feel backaches, insomnia, and palpitations. Because your body is paying the price for that faulty neural circuit in your brain. You think you are fighting against unfilial children. Actually, you are fighting against the neural landscape you yourself have shaped bit by bit over decades. And in this purely physical struggle, you can never win simply by reasoning. When you try to enlighten yourself with logic, you are like a person standing at the bottom of a deep canyon trying to alter the shape of the canyon rocks by shouting. The canyon simply cannot hear your voice. Your nervous system also simply cannot understand your grand logic. It cannot understand your psychological suggestions about tolerance, letting go, and letting children live their own lives. You may have watched countless health videos for seniors on your phone teaching you how to be open-minded. You may have read countless viral articles about how to find self-worth after retirement. Every time you see those golden quotes that speak right to your heart, you feel a wave of relief. You feel you have finally achieved a great awakening. You feel you have finally let it all go completely. You feel that starting tomorrow, you will never get the slightest bit angry over those trivial matters again. But this relief is merely a temporary deception on a chemical level. It is a false reward mechanism brought about by a tiny bit of dopamine secreted by your brain. The physical structure of your nervous system has not changed by even a single millimeter. That neural groove filled with grievance remains just as deep and just as wide. The next day, when your children call and hastily hang up again, or reject your good intentions once more, your feet will inevitably and instantly slip right back into that familiar neural trap. You will feel even more desperate than yesterday because you realize those so-called life philosophies are utterly useless. What is even more terrifying is that you have not realized that non-action is itself an action of the highest intensity. You think sitting there sulking is just a brief pause in life. You think you are just waiting for the right moment to resolve the conflict between you. James saw through this most dangerous self-deceiving lie of humanity over a century ago. Every time you feel wronged but do nothing except complain, you are not staying in place and remaining neutral. You are actively and intensely practicing your grievance. You are constantly reinforcing that victim neural circuit. Every time you replay your sacrifice in your mind, your brain's sensitivity to this pain increases by a degree. You are training your own brain into an extremely precise and highly efficient pain manufacturing machine. Let us look at an extremely common real-life scenario. Before retiring, old Lee was a technical backbone at a large factory. His greatest pride in life was living frugally to the point of refusing to buy nice clothes so he could ultimately pay for a downtown apartment in full for his son's marriage. He fully expected this house to earn his son and daughter in-laws boundless respect and meticulous care. As a result, his son was under immense work pressure and simply had no time to visit him. His daughter-in-law felt his living habits were outdated and was reluctant to bring their grandson over even for a holiday reunion dinner. Old Lee was so angry every day that he could not sleep and complained to everyone he met that he had raised ungrateful wolves. Old Lee thought his pain was because his son was unfilial. But in reality, if we analyze it deeply, old Lee fell into the classic sunk cost fallacy. He invested so much that the only way his brain could operate was to demand an emotional return. Old Lee's pain is because his brain has been completely jammed on this single neural circuit that demands a return for sacrifice. This is why some elderly people well into their 70s and 80s still brood over an argument from 30 or 40 years ago. It is not that the injury was objectively that deep. It is that they have spent a lifetime neurologically reviewing that injury every single day. They have trapped themselves to death in the tunnel of pain they dug themselves unable to turn around. Let us propose a hypothesis. Suppose you suddenly won 10 million in the lottery today. Do you think you would instantly be happy just because you have money? If you do not change your brain's neural circuits, you will still use this 10 million to worry about your children's mortgages and your grandchildren's school districts. You will still retreat into a corner after spending the money on them to feel that familiar grievance of being neglected. Because your brain simply does not know what enjoying freedom means. It only recognizes the word victim. So stop watching that psychological chicken soup that teaches you how to forgive. Stop trying to use understanding and empathy to solve the structural problems at the physical level of your brain. You do not need more sociological knowledge. You do not need deeper moral comprehension. What you need is to execute an extremely violent physical severance on your nervous system. Because you have gotten the order of change completely backward. You have always thought you must first think it through. You have always thought you must first completely forgive them from the bottom of your heart. You have always thought you must first attain absolute inner peace before you can start your new twilight years. From a neuroscience perspective, this is absolutely impossible. Feeling will never run ahead of action. Feeling can only be the byproduct generated by physical action. William James wrote an extremely cold but incredibly true sentence in the Principles of Psychology. We need only in cold blood act as if the thing in question were real, and keep acting as if it were real, until it becomes knit so deeply into habit and emotion that it becomes actual objective reality. Note the phrase he used is in cold blood. You absolutely cannot wait anymore. You cannot wait until you are fully ready. You cannot wait until your mood has completely settled. You must force your legs to take the first step in altering the terrain at the exact moment you feel extreme grievance and extreme unwillingness. Identity recognition is produced following physical behavior. True inner peace is produced following concrete muscle movements. This is why all efforts attempting to change the status quo through self-persuasion ultimately fail completely. Because without receiving entirely new muscle and behavioral data, the brain is absolutely incapable of generating new feelings out of thin air. You are waiting for an output result that will never naturally arrive through waiting. You must input entirely new commands into your brain. This command cannot be language, and it cannot be thought. It must be a concrete, merciless, decisive physical action. To completely break this terrifying sacrifice trap, James left behind several explicit neurological rebuilding guidelines. Rule number 1. Launch your new habit with as strong and decided an initiative as possible. When you decide to stop living for your children's evaluation, do not make the decision quietly. Do not leave yourself any retreat or leeway. Immediately transfer the money you originally intended to use to buy high-end seafood for them into your own travel account. Immediately enroll in that traditional folk culture class or community college you always wanted to attend for the afternoon you originally planned to babysit for them. Use every possible means to make your new decision and your old habits absolutely physically incompatible. A quiet internal vow is equivalent to a direct declaration of death. You must use a massive action to shock your nervous system that is already accustomed to suffering in silence. Rule number 2. Never suffer a single exception to occur until the new habit is securely rooted. Every soft-hearted compromise is like letting go of a ball of string you are struggling to wind up. Even a tiny slip will send the ball of string tumbling to the bottom, making all your months of effort vanish in an instant. This sounds very harsh and perhaps even inhumane. Indeed, it is very harsh, because your nervous system simply does not understand the concept of just this once or never again. It is a cold machine that only recognizes frequency. If you decide to completely leave them alone, and then one day you cannot help but clean their messy house once again, your brain will immediately receive a strong signal. It turns out the new path of independence is merely an optional backup plan. It turns out that the old path of sacrifice and grievance is still our ultimate destination. You are not negotiating with a reasonable moral saint. You are using a chisel to carve entirely new grooves into solid rock. This physical engineering of carving has zero tolerance. Rule number 3. This is the rule that can completely reshape your twilight years and even alter your family's destiny. Seize the very first possible opportunity to translate your decision into concrete physical action. Absolutely do not procrastinate until tomorrow. Absolutely do not delay until next week or wait until after the holidays. It must be the very first opportunity that immediately appears after the moment you make the decision. At the exact moment you tell yourself, I want to live for myself. If it does not immediately produce a substantive motor effect, if it does not immediately translate into a specific muscle movement, then this grand decision has never existed in your nervous system. It is just a gust of wind. It is just a cloud of mist that easily dissipates. If you make the painful resolution today to stop interfering in their young lifestyles, then within the next 24 hours, when they once again complain to you about life pressures or work frustrations, you must physically clamp your mouth tightly shut and absolutely offer no advice. You must physically hang up that phone immediately or directly stand up and walk out of that room full of negative energy. As long as no actual movement is produced, all your profound epiphanies are worthless scrap paper. Rule number 4. Keep the faculty of effort alive by doing a little difficult gratuitous exercise every day. Do not ever pursue that so-called perfect retirement life of complete comfort and doing nothing. Complete comfort is a powerful accelerator for neurological degeneration and Alzheimer's disease. Deliberately do some tiny actions every day, purely because they are difficult. For example, learn to use a complex smartphone app that you completely do not understand. For example, walk a complicated route home that you have never walked before. This is not to create any economic value in a worldly sense. It is to pay a high insurance premium for that neural muscle named overcoming instinct, so that when genuine feelings of grievance wash over you again, like a massive tsunami, you will have a highly trained neural army ready to mobilize immediately to fight against your instincts. Do not always live your life following the downhill momentum of your grievances. You must deliberately create some friction to swim against the current. Look carefully at these 4 cold rules. There is no discussion of great maternal love or deep paternal affection in them. There is no literary lyricism about whether family bonds are magnificent or tragic. There is no empty talk about finding the ultimate meaning of life. These are purely mechanical, cold, emotionless neurological execution commands. Because what you are fighting against is not some ethereal twist of fate. You are fighting against your own flesh and blood machine that is frantically reinforcing old habits day and night. In front of this precise and merciless machine, all your sighs and tears are extremely pale and powerless. James once sharply said that all of us are nothing but walking bundles of habits. You are absolutely not the grand tragic protagonist who sacrificed themselves to fulfill others as you imagine. You are exactly the sum of those physical movements of avoiding conflict, complaining, and compromising that you repeatedly make every day. If you finished watching this lengthy video and merely felt a little touched inside, if you just felt that I happened to voice the feelings you have suppressed for years, and then you sighed deeply at the screen, and tomorrow morning you still wake up on time to go to the crowded market to pick the cheapest vegetables to cook for them, and tomorrow you continue to listen to them pour out their bitterness on the phone while you secretly feel sad alone, then you must immediately understand how cruel and pathetic what just happened is. You have once again perfectly utilized the profound insights I provided as an advanced anesthetic to delay your own change. You replaced actual sweating action with that false sense of clarity you got after watching the video. You replaced painful change with cheap emotion. You replaced true execution with mere knowing. This state is 10,000 times worse than knowing absolutely nothing at all, because every time you achieve an epiphany but refuse to act, you are carving that paralyzed neural circuit that only thinks and never acts even deeper and more solidly. Your knowledge and life experience are no longer sharp tools to change your tragic fate. They have become a deadly poison that makes you feel incredibly comfortable in your mental paralysis. You have lived in this world for most of your life. You have experienced more than enough, and you know more than enough. The various grand principles stored in your head have already overflowed long ago. What you lack right now is absolutely not a new piece of advice or a perfect explanation. What you lack is a near cruel cold-bloodedness. A cold-bloodedness to mercilessly swing a knife and cut off your own deep-rooted old habits of decades. So do not wait another second. Do not wait anymore for that late understanding that fundamentally does not exist. Do not wait anymore for that illusory state of perfect readiness that is forever impossible. Take action immediately, even if this action seems extremely insignificant to others, even if this action appears somewhat selfish and unsympathetic under traditional moral scrutiny. Today, right before the sun goes down today, force yourself to do one thing that you absolutely did not dare to do in the past few decades. Go buy that expensive piece of clothing you have looked at for a long time but always gave up on because it was too pricey. Without hesitation, reject an extremely unreasonable request of theirs that you clearly do not want to agree to but always reluctantly accepted. Immediately turn around and leave that family conversation environment that makes you feel incredibly suppressed and wronged. Absolutely do not explain your behavior. Absolutely do not engage in any meaningless arguments with them. Just purely cold-bloodedly and decisively execute this physical action. Let your body walk out before your mind does. Force your nervous system to adapt to this completely new, unfamiliar, and perhaps even terrifying feeling of freedom. Only when you truly grit your teeth and take this counterintuitive first step, will you have truly opened your eyes in this mud pit of despair where you have been tightly trapped by your sense of sacrifice. Otherwise, you will continue walking down this hopeless track until the end of your life. You will continue to be a lifelong prisoner, forever lost and forever suffering in the grooves of your own brain.